Why did England in 1666 punish someone by forcing them to wear a barrel-like clothing in public? Reports tie it to repeated drinking, and some accounts aim it at promiscuous women, while neighbors follow, laugh, and throw things. Today, I'll show you 20 most horrific female torture devices of the Inquisition. Let's start with number 20. Shrews fiddle. 2 holes, 1 lock, and a crowd that never lets you look away. A private fight between women turns into a moving sign of shame for everyone to read. The Shrews fiddle looks almost playful at first, a wooden board shaped like a rough violin. Yet the joke ends the moment the lock clicks shut. 1 larger hole traps the neck, 2 smaller holes trap the wrists, and the whole thing rides on the shoulders like a heavy frame you cannot set down. Hands stay forced forward, which means eating, wiping tears, or covering your face all require someone else to help, and that dependence becomes part of the punishment. Town records and later illustrations place these neck violins in parts of Germany and Austria from the late Middle Ages into the early modern period. Women labeled quarrelsome, gossipy, or unruly end up marching through streets in these portable stocks, sometimes with a small bell attached so people hear them coming. Some versions lock 2 women face to face, turning every step into a forced confrontation until they make peace. It sells itself as order, yet it runs on humiliation, and that same fear of women's bodies comes next. Here comes number 19. Breast flattening boards. A girl's body starts changing, and adults react with panic instead of care. What should signal growing up becomes a reason to press her back into childhood. Breast flattening boards appear in modern torture museums and illustrations as wooden planks or tight bindings strapped across a young woman's chest, meant to crush or hide developing breasts. The historical record sparks arguments about specific surviving devices, yet the idea points to a familiar logic. Stop a girl from looking adult so men claim temptation stays away, then punish her if growth appears anyway. A closely related practice survives in the modern world: breast ironing in Cameroon and other parts of Africa. Mothers or older women heat stones or presses and repeatedly push them into a girl's chest to delay breast growth, and human rights groups and UN committees classify it as gender-based violence and torture against girls, even when families describe it as protection. When flattening boards appear in European collections, they read like a visual summary of that same fear. Control the body early or risk dishonor later. Once that impulse makes sense, the Spanish spider feels like the next, darker step. Let's move to number 18. Spanish spider. 1 metal claw hangs on a wall, quiet, clean, and ready. It targets the body part male judges fixate on most, and it turns obsession into injury. The Spanish spider appears in books and museum catalogs as a barbed iron device fixed to a wall. A woman's breast is placed into curved claws, then she is pulled away, and the image suggests tearing as she moves. Later writers connect it to women accused of adultery, abortion, or sexual crimes, because the device turns judgment into damage with one brutal motion. A catch sits underneath the story. Modern historians who studied many medieval torture devices point out that numerous objects come from 19th century collections, built during a wave of fascination with Gothic horror, and some spiders may reflect Victorian fantasy more than documented Inquisition procedure. Still, written accounts describe female saints and prisoners having breasts cut, torn, or burned during interrogation, and the spider turns that cruelty into hardware, a warning on display. Whether museum piece or reconstruction, the message stays sharp. A woman's sexuality belongs to men with keys. Next, even hair becomes a handle. Next one is number 17, hair-pulling frame. Hair can signal beauty, virtue, and status in a single glance. Inside a torture space, that same hair becomes a rope, and the scalp pays for it. Picture a wooden frame or beam above a prisoner's head. Her hair gets twisted into cords or ropes and tied up to the frame, and the interrogators pull, tighten, or jerk the bindings so every movement drags pain across the scalp. Hair resists breaking, which means the strain travels through skin into the neck and face, and the victim learns that even turning her head carries a price. Early modern legal records describe hair used in punishment in several ways. Shaving women accused of adultery or collaboration, burning hair off, or dragging victims by their hair in public. Those gestures carry a simple message that lands fast. Your appearance sits under our authority, and we can strip it away whenever we choose. Many torture museums display a hair-pulling frame as a symbol of that wider reality. And even when examples vary, the method fits a world where female modesty and beauty stay under constant surveillance. Once you watch how authorities weaponize appearance, a Nordic Scold's cup for public humiliation follows naturally. If you're into this, hit subscribe and tap like right now, because the next entry gets even darker. Let's move to number 16. Scold cup. A drink feels safe when you lift it in your own kitchen. Under moral law, the same act turns into a public lesson meant to break your pride. Scold cup appears in Scandinavian stories as a scold's cup, tied to gossip and moral offenses. It sits alongside other European tools aimed at scolds, where punishment works best when neighbors watch and laugh. Some accounts describe women forced to drink repeated cups of filthy water or bitter mixtures while restrained, and other versions describe a cup that hangs from the neck like a collar, announcing to everyone what a woman supposedly did. The details shift across sources, yet the outcome stays steady. The community gathers while authorities label the suffering moral correction. Historians connect the harshness of these punishments to periods of religious anxiety, when church courts and civic leaders cooperate to enforce discipline. Shame becomes a ritual, and the woman's body becomes the stage. It starts with liquid and ends with identity, and once that pattern forms, the next object feels almost cruelly clever. A chair promises rest, then punishes every tiny movement. Here comes number 15. Needle chair. A chair usually means food, warmth, and a moment to breathe. This one turns sitting into a trap, where every shift feels like choosing pain again. The needle chair appears in many torture museums as a heavy wooden seat covered in metal spikes across the seat, back, and armrests. The spikes often sit short of breaking skin at first, which means a victim can sit, yet any adjustment of weight presses sharp points into flesh. That design forces a grim rhythm. Hold still until muscles burn, then move and feel the sting. Scholars who track original documents warn that many surviving chairs were assembled or exaggerated in the 19th century to attract tourists. Still, slow positional torture through forced sitting and standing appears in real early modern prisons, convents, and workhouses. Prisoners spend hours on hard benches or stones until cramps set in and circulation fails, especially when cold joins the punishment and turns pain into a long, numbing ordeal. The needle chair makes that slow damage visible in one glance, and for women accused of heresy or immorality, the message stays blunt. Obey, stay still, and endure. Once you understand pain as public control, the story moves outdoors, to a tree everyone in town recognizes. Let's move to number 14, whipping tree. Some trees hold shade for games, gossip, and summer fairs. Others stand like a warning sign, because everyone knows what happens at that trunk. A whipping tree functions less like a crafted device and more like a fixed outdoor stage. In many European towns, authorities choose one tree near the square or church as the place where floggings take place. A woman gets tied to the trunk, often with arms raised or bound, and the law sets the number of lashes like a cold accounting entry. Crowds form because the spectacle matters as much as the pain. Trials for offenses such as adultery, petty theft, or repeated night walking sometimes end in whipping rather than execution. On paper, that can read like mercy. In life, public flogging carves scars into skin and reputation at the same time, and people remember who stood at that tree for years. Legal manuals place whipping posts and trees beside pillories, stocks, and branding irons, and women sometimes receive fewer strokes than men. Yet social damage can last longer in a world where reputation shapes marriage prospects and survival. A tree roots punishment in the ground, and the next step uses water instead, turning breath into a countdown. Next one is number 13, ducking cage. Water keeps you alive in small, ordinary sips. Used like this, it becomes a timer, and every gasp turns into a public test. The ducking cage grows out of the same mentality that produced the ducking stool. Early modern sources describe women accused of gossip, prostitution, or witchcraft tied to chairs or caged frames attached to a long arm over rivers or ponds. Officials swing the arm, the prisoner plunges under, then they haul her up again while crowds watch her sputter and shake. The repetition matters because the fear resets every time the surface closes overhead. In witch hunt logic, the dunking functions as both torture and test. Survive too easily, and suspicion deepens. Panic and fainting feed another story, and the woman never finds a clean way to pass. From a distance, ducking can look mild compared to mutilation. Yet cold water, shock, and public humiliation combine into intense psychological pressure, especially during winter or at night. Once breathing becomes a privilege granted by a lever, the next punishment stays on land and turns clothing into a heavy joke you cannot remove, a barrel you have to wear. Let's move to number 12, drunkard's cloak. First, drinking promises escape from shame and stress. Then officials turn the symbol of drinking into your costume, and everyone gets to laugh. The drunkard's cloak appears in 17th century England and parts of Europe as a barrel turned into a wearable prison. Authorities cut a hole for the head and smaller holes for the arms, then force the offender to walk the streets inside the heavy cask. Chronicles and later analyses describe it as punishment for repeat drunkards, and some reports extend it to promiscuous women and other public nuisances. The weight does the first part of the work, because carrying a barrel drains strength fast, yet the crowd does the rest. Onlookers jeer, throw things, or follow along, and the victim becomes a moving warning sign about vice. A 1666 description even calls it a new-fashioned cloak, as if humiliation itself turned into clothing you never asked to wear. Modern historians still debate how widely the punishment spread, yet the logic fits a culture that prefers public ridicule over private help, especially for women who step outside narrow rules. Once you see a barrel used like rotten armor, the next step feels like a grim work lesson. Authorities hand you stones and call it discipline. Here comes number 11. Stone weight walking. Every step through a village usually builds a life, market to home to church. Tie stones to that walk, and each familiar path becomes a sentence you carry in public. Stone weight walking describes a family of punishments where women carry heavy loads through town or around the pillory while onlookers watch. Instead of locking someone in place, a court orders both the root and the burden. Rocks in baskets, chains of lead, or sacks of grain tied around the neck or waist. The town becomes a track, and every lap becomes a lesson. Legal historians tracing early modern Europe note that many bylaws link punishment to work. If a woman gossips, drinks, or fights, the solution often demands exhausting labor under the gaze of neighbors, and the body pays with aching joints and swollen feet. In deeply religious regions, the walk can resemble a twisted pilgrimage, circling a church or public cross as if the woman must physically carry her sin before returning home. Numbers matter in the telling. 10 circuits, 20 stones, 30 days of repeated laps. Once legs grow weak and shoulders bruise, a whip with metal tips lands with a faster kind of cruelty. Next comes the scorpion, where one stroke feels like many. Let's move to number 10. Scorpion whip. A simple leather strap already burns and bruises with each swing. Add metal, hooks, or knots, and every strike spreads into several stings at once. Scorpion whip works as a modern label for multi-thonged whips fitted with small metal pieces, hooks, or knots at the ends. Ancient Rome used similar flagra on slaves and prisoners, and early modern authorities carry on the tradition in varied forms, sometimes reserving harsher implements for offenders judged stubborn. The point sits in the sensation. One blow multiplies into many bites across the skin. In religious settings, the language of correction or penitence often wraps around these whips like a polite cover. Some convent and prison rules distinguish between symbolic lashes and full punishments where each blow cuts, bruises, and opens the skin. And when sentences mention scorpions, they refer to that clustered sting. For women, public whipping links bodily pain with sexualized humiliation, because the back, and sometimes the upper body, become exposed while discipline turns into spectacle. Fast pain changes the crowd's mood in seconds, and the next punishment slows everything again by taking the face itself. An iron mask and a bell make sure everyone looks. Here comes number 9. Shame mask with bell. Your face tells your story before you speak a single word, so authorities replace it with metal, and the new face turns you into a joke on purpose. Shame masks, or shandmasken, developed across Central Europe as iron faces meant to punish people for gossiping, lying, or breaking expected roles. Many surviving examples show exaggerated noses, tongues, or animal features, turning the wearer into a living caricature. Some include spikes that press into the tongue, and some carry a bell on the forehead, so every movement draws attention. Sources describe men receiving this punishment too, yet women who talk too much often stand at the front of the line. The mask clamps around the head and locks in place, which means eating becomes hard, speech turns muffled, and hiding becomes impossible. Passers-by throw food, mock, or strike the metal, and that public reaction becomes part of the sentence. These masks blur torture and social theater. They hurt, and they also rewrite a woman's identity in public, which can damage her prospects long after the lock opens. Once the face belongs to the authorities, the next step claims the body above the waist with a heavy yoke that turns shoulders into a prison frame. Let's move to number 8. Wooden yoke. A single plank looks harmless until it rests on your shoulders for hours. Carry it through town, and your crime becomes a thing everyone can point at. The punishment yoke appears in simple forms: a heavy board or frame with a hole cut for the neck, sometimes with additional holes for the hands. In China, a similar device called the kang weighed 10 to 30 kilograms, and criminals walked streets while their offense hung on a placard. The weight and the display do the work together. European records describe comparable yokes and collars used on women judged thieves, prostitutes, or rebellious wives. The strain hits the spine and shoulders, and the size makes sleeping and eating difficult. A woman yoked this way often relies on others for basic needs, and that dependence deepens the humiliation because help comes from the same community watching her suffer. The yoke also carries symbolic force. Sermons and court speeches talk about bringing disobedient people under the yoke, and turning that phrase into hardware lets rulers show power on market days and feast days. Once the neck loses freedom, authorities return to the scalp, and they remove hair completely in front of witnesses. The next punishment keeps working long after the square empties. Next one is number 7. Public head shaving. A woman can survive fines, lectures, and even a flogging, then keep walking. Cut her hair in public, and the punishment follows her for months in every doorway. Head shaving appears across Europe and beyond as a punishment for women, including those accused of collaboration after wars, alleged prostitutes, and women convicted of adultery or religious offenses. In early modern towns, moral ordinances treat long hair as a sign of femininity and modesty, so shaving flips that symbol into a mark of disgrace. The cruelty sits in the duration, because a shaved head stays visible long after the official sentence ends. Unlike a single session of pain, the shaved scalp becomes a moving label that makes finding work, marriage, or safe lodging far harder. Chronicles from later centuries describe crowds jeering, spitting, or drawing crude signs on the victim's scalp, and that public participation turns punishment into community ownership. Public shaving also prepares the body for further harm, because hair protects against cold and sun, and taking it away turns daily life into a low-level ordeal. Once a shaved head stands out like a target, a hood that invites strangers to aim at you adds another layer. Next comes a spit hood, where even breathing can feel dirty. Let's move to number 6, spit hood. At first it looks like a sack, the sort of cloth you forget in a corner. Then you understand its purpose, because strangers can aim at your face without seeing it. In this context, the spit hood refers to hoods or masks placed over the heads of women held for moral or religious offenses, while guards or onlookers spit, throw trash, or hurl insults. The hood hides features, yet it makes the body available for humiliation, and the fabric can absorb moisture and filth until the victim breathes through cloth soaked in what the crowd leaves behind. Modern prison abuse investigations describe similar use of hoods and spit guards to dehumanize detainees, even when officials claim the coverings protect staff. That link between older and newer cases highlights a repeating tactic. Cover the head to erase individuality, then pressure a person into compliance through shame and discomfort. For devout women, the hood adds another sting, because it twists the idea of a veil from chosen modesty into enforced disgrace. Once the face disappears under cloth, the next device goes further and cages the whole torso. Clothing stops serving beauty or warmth, and it becomes rigid metal that controls how a woman stands, breathes, and moves. Here comes number 5, iron corset. Fashion promises beauty and status, and it trains the body to fit a shape. An iron bodice keeps the shape, yet the price can feel like control with a lock. Real iron corsets survive in museum collections from the 16th and 17th centuries. They resemble nightmare armor for the upper body, rigid metal shells shaped like female stays, with holes for lacing or locking. Curators and fashion historians argue over purpose. Some pieces likely serve as orthopedic braces prescribed by doctors for spinal problems, and other examples likely function as extreme posture trainers or restraints coded as chastity. Later writers, eager for horror, label every iron corset a torture device, yet the reality sits in a gray zone. A brace that holds the back upright with unyielding steel can still feel like torment when a girl must wear it day and night without choice. Sharp edges, heat, and weight turn ordinary tasks into minor ordeals, and the body learns to move around the cage. For women already under suspicion by church courts or families, an iron corset becomes visible proof that even posture and breathing fall under supervision. Once metal dictates the shape of the ribs, the next step brands flesh directly. A small tool warms in coals, and the burn leaves a message that lasts for decades. Next one is number 4, breast branding forks. A small iron tool rests near coals, and the heat keeps climbing. Its shape gives away the target, because the mark belongs on the body part of the police. Branding appears widely in early modern Europe and in colonies as punishment. Courts mark thieves, deserters, or slaves with letters and symbols pressed into skin. In accounts tied to women accused of adultery or prostitution, later collections describe small fork-like branding tools sized for the breast. The idea stays brutally direct. One quick burn leaves a scar exactly where society claims a woman's shame lives. Scholars warn that some highly specific tools may come from 19th century reconstructions. Still, documentation for breast mutilation as punishment reaches back into stories of early Christian martyrs, and scattered legal records mention injuries to the chest. Whether the tool matches one official Inquisition model matters less than the pattern. Sexual judgment becomes bodily damage, and the scar serves as a long-term warning to husbands, employers, and neighbors. Pain fades, yet the mark keeps speaking long after a judge moves on. After heat marks the upper body, the next punishment uses cold wetness and time, especially in quiet institutions that want discipline without open bloodshed. A plain bench can do more than a blade. Let's move to number 3, urine punishment bench. Some cells rely on chains and iron to hurt you. Others use time, a narrow bench, and a basic human need, then turn that need into shame. Reports from convent visitations, prison reforms, and later human rights inquiries describe a recurring form of dry torture. Women must sit upright on narrow benches for hours or days, denied toilets or movement. Eventually, the body gives in. Urine pools under and around them, and guards leave them there soaked, cold, and humiliated. You rarely see these benches in dramatic museum displays because they lack spikes and theatrical shapes. Yet the effects stack up quietly. Extended exposure to wet, dirty surfaces can lead to skin infections and chills, and the humiliation cuts deep, especially for those raised to treat cleanliness as a sign of religious purity. The phrase urine punishment bench, used in some modern descriptions, captures that mix of bodily need and deliberate neglect. Authority holds power through refusal, because no whip swing is needed when the simple act of standing gets denied. Once soft tissue suffers in silence, the next tools move pain downward into feet and bones that carry weight with every step. Take away a woman's ability to walk, and escape disappears. Next one is number 2. Foot-crushing clogs. Feet keep a woman independent, mark it to work, to home, to safety. Target the feet, and the world shrinks, because every step becomes a threat. Across many regions, stocks and wooden boots appear as punishments. Courts lock ankles into heavy blocks, sometimes driving wedges in to increase pressure. When modern collections describe foot-crushing clogs, they usually point to variants of this idea. Oversized wooden shoes or frames that squeeze toes and arches over time. Pressure on the feet creates a special kind of cruelty, because the pain renews with every attempt to stand. Nerves in the toes and arches complain quickly, and long sessions can lead to numbness or lasting damage. For women who rely on walking to fetch water, sell goods, or visit family, this punishment turns daily survival into a painful negotiation. Authorities sometimes combine foot restraints with public display, similar to stocks, and the crowd passes, stares, and comments while the victim sits half immobilized on a bench. Crush the foundation of the body, and the rest follows. After wood and wedges, the final device reaches inside with liquid, using a household substance as a weapon. The next story ends with a throat and a caustic burn. And the last is number 1. Forced infusion of lye. Water cleans dishes, clothes, and floors, and it feels harmless in a bucket. Mix it with alkali and force it down a throat, and the body becomes the thing being cleaned. Lye and similar caustic solutions appear in household soap making, and they also appear in dark stories of interrogation and punishment. Forcing prisoners to drink harsh chemicals shows up in scattered witch trial accounts and later human rights reports. The liquid burns the mouth, esophagus, and stomach, and it can lead to internal bleeding, vomiting, or slow organ failure. Early modern documentation rarely lists exact recipes, yet the logic stays consistent. A cleaning substance associated with domestic labor gets flipped into a threat, And the same hands that scrub floors face the idea of being cleansed from the inside if they confess to heresy or moral crime. Modern law classifies forced ingestion of toxic fluids as torture without question, and international treaties treat it as a clear violation of the absolute ban on cruel and inhuman treatment. Ending with lie underlines something grim. The most horrific tools can combine common materials, social shame, and male authority over women's bodies and voices. And that combination stays harder to forget than iron ever could. You just saw how control turns wood, water, and metal into weapons, and the list keeps darker. Another secret's out, but the next one is bigger. Click the next video.